Hello everyone. This video is going to be a little different from what I usually do. It's more of my thoughts on a recent interview between Kotaku and Aaron Flynn, who was until relatively recently the general manager of BioWare, as well as the reactions that I've seen to his interview. It's going to be a little unorganized. I tried writing everything down beforehand, but it seemed like kind of a mess. I'm just going to go right into it. A little bit of a disclaimer beforehand. I want to make it clear that this video is in no way an inherent defense of the business practices that Electronic Arts has been pursuing over the last year or so, or really any of their decisions since I've been playing their games. There's never really been a time in my life where I've purchased a game because EA's logo was on the cover. I don't exactly have brand loyalty to them, but I would say that at one point I did have brand loyalty to BioWare, but that time has passed. So the interview in question featured some portions where Jason Schreier, I believe his name is, he was asking Aaron Flynn about some of the decisions that the company has made and whether or not that was something that they felt influenced to do by Electronic Arts. And generally Aaron Flynn seemed to say, no, we weren't forced to put microtransactions in our games. We weren't forced to use the Frostbite engine because EA made it and they wanted us to use it. He accepted responsibility for making these decisions, or at least the applicable decisions during his tenure. And yet, I've seen people online acting like he's just lying, or he's covering for his former bosses, or that he's signed some kind of a contract that prevents him from telling the truth. Some pretty ridiculous things, and I don't really understand it because I know a lot of people hate EA. They've hated EA for a long time. It's really come to a head over the past year, and I completely understand why. But I don't really get it. Why is it so unreasonable to think that BioWare couldn't make certain decisions on their own? It's not unreasonable to think that maybe they just wanted to try to see how a microtransaction system might work for Mass Effect 3's multiplayer, that Dragon Age Inquisition, it was open world, not because they made them make it open world, but because they wanted to try it, and Skyrim had proven to be a big hit. And same with Andromeda. That's open world because their previous game was open world. It doesn't mean they were forced to do it. It just made sense to them at the time. Same with using the Frostbite engine. It's easy to look at these decisions and assume the publisher was involved, but that isn't always the case. And honestly, even now, it's really tiring to still hear people saying it has to be EA. It has to be their fault. Because I've been hearing this stuff for like at least 6 years. Mass Effect 3's ending, it turned out the way it did because it was EA. Dragon Age 2 was a shorter game because of EA. Dead Space 3 had a bad ending because of EA. Crysis 2's graphics aren't as good as the first game because of EA. Like, I've heard a lot of things over the years. I acknowledge that some of them are more ridiculous than others, but people are so bitter, and they really have to believe that it's the publisher's fault. And this isn't entirely without merit. Publishers, they can impose decisions on development teams. It's not an unheard of thing. I think a solid example of that would be multiplayer. EA has probably mandated that every forthcoming game should have that. They've probably mandated that games should have DLC, and they probably pay those companies to make the DLC, you know? I don't think it's a completely insidious decision. The online pass program from several years ago, that was something they came up with, but it didn't work out. It wasn't profitable. It was a bad idea, but they realized that. So I'm not saying that publishers don't exert control, but it kind of annoys me because people, they want to take the easy way out. It's easy to blame the publisher for things that we don't have any proof are their fault. The publisher is not concerned with the micromanaging of the game's development. They just want the game to be good enough that it'll make them money. That's their primary concern. I'm not surprised to hear quotes coming out from other BioWare employees, ex-BioWare employees, who have said that if Electronic Arts didn't make a deal to purchase them, BioWare probably would have gone under many, many years ago. And we wouldn't have gotten a Mass Effect 2, maybe not even the first one. We wouldn't have gotten Dragon Age Origins Origins, we wouldn't have gotten anything that came after that. And I think that that's their job. The publisher's job is to basically provide stability for companies that are independent or maybe can't make it on their own. That's the relationship that they have. And EA obviously wants BioWare games to be good because they're one of the few brands that they have left. That said, I do think the BioWare brand has been damaged. I'm being completely honest about that. I don't like either of the games that were released when Aaron Flynn was in charge of BioWare. So I'm not really defending him, but he accepted responsibility for things people were critical of. And he should be allowed to do that. I don't want to see people saying, no, that apology is not real. It just seems like a really unreasonable opinion. I think that a lot of it comes down to this point. People feel like they need some kind of boogeyman to blame because when something that they like is not good anymore, they have trouble accepting that. Let's imagine for a minute that the Star Wars prequels were exactly the same as they are today. But like in 1993, Disney had purchased the rights to Star Wars. They're the same movies. Same people worked on them. If Disney's name was attached to it, as this overseer, somehow I think people would be a lot more reluctant to blame George Lucas for the quality of those films, even though he wrote and directed them all by himself. Especially if you grew up with Star Wars decades earlier, if it really informed you as a person. I think that that's an important thing to note, and I also want to make this other aspect clear. This is what really bothers me. If you're going to blame the publisher for everything that happens with the studio's product that you don't like, then don't you have to also give the publisher credit when they do something you do like? This is really the strange thing, is that EA can't ever do anything right, and they're not the only publisher like this. I'm referring to EA because they're the example, but a lot of what I'm saying can apply to many publishers. But that's my point. The developers are the ones who get the credit for the good stuff, but the publisher is never a part of that. If the developer does something you don't like, you can just put it on the publisher. And this is really kind of sad. It's a weird double standard, and people need to do a better job of looking at what is good, what is bad, what is appropriate to theorize that the publisher has mandated, and what is just a everyday creative decision being made by the game's designers, writers, programmers, other artists, etc. So I'm not really surprised that people seem to not want to accept Aaron Flynn's admission of guilt, if you will. And I know it's not really that. I wouldn't say that he has accepted responsibility for things in a tearful manner, but he's left the company for a reason. And I don't know. I don't know where I stand with BioWare. I can't see myself getting Anthem. I don't really want to play Dragon Age 4 if it's even still in development. So for me, it's not a company that I care about anymore. And that's not the publisher's fault. I can blame them to some degree, but I have to put the blame on the people who I trusted to make good games. They let me down, and I've moved on. And that's what other people should do. So that's really all I wanted to say about this. Maybe you completely disagree with me. That's totally fine. Let me know in the comments if I've made some kind of glaring logical error in all of this. And have a good day.